Hey guys, I've never been particularly happy with the sound output levels on a couple of my Admiral sets. A while ago I did a video on aligning these and getting some decent sound out of it, and at the time it seemed okay, but now that I've restored a few more TVs, I've come to realize that the sound should be a lot louder coming out of these sets. So I did a little more research and asking around online, and I got a great tip that in addition to replacing all the components underneath, I might want to take a look inside these cans here, because there are some capacitors inside there. In particular on this, which connects the first audio stage to the second audio amp stage. There are, or were I should say, two kind of crude capacitors. By crude I mean they were what they call mica capacitors, which is what these are, but they weren't encapsulated in anything. It was literally just some sheets of raw mica with some metal in between. Well, those can go bad over time, and apparently that was the case in this set. So I took those out and popped in a couple new modern ones, and it definitely helped. Now, after doing that, I really need to realign the set, which brings me to the topic of this video, which is doing some more alignment work. And there's something else I found out. When I did it before, I used this Hitchcock 615, which is a great piece of equipment, and I've fully restored it, except for one thing. I was missing all the cables when I got this. And what I used when I did my alignment was a cable like this, which is coax cable. It has this old type of connector they used before DNCs came about, and the end of it was just kind of like a meter probe, nothing special. Well, since then I got the manual and was reading, and you're really not supposed to do that. You're supposed to use a cable with a termination pad on it, which of course I don't have, but I'm going to try to make one. I was lucky with the ICA 369 I got recently, which did have the termination cable, so I have some idea of what they look like and how they're assembled. So here's a similar coax with that same type of connector on the end. But on the other end is this little plastic tube here, and inside that is a resistor, and then a couple nice alligator leads. So I'm going to try to make something like this for this guy. Now, it'd be great if I could just use this, but I can't, because this is a 50 ohm termination, whereas this guy needs 90 ohms. Not only that, but it needs some specialized resistors called non-inductive resistors. Well, one of my viewers was kind enough to donate some parts here, so I've got a couple 44 ohm non-inductive resistors. Together that'll make 88, which is close enough to 90 for my purposes. Also got some nice coax, and I've got the makings of one of these connectors, so I just need to dig up some alligator clips and try to put all this together and make a usable cable. Once I do, I'm going to go through and align this again, because not only did I put two new capacitors in here, but I figured I might as well replace some other micas underneath here. And I'm hoping once I go through all this process, I'll have some much better sound. For the first step, I've prepared one end of the coax. I don't have a fancy coax stripper, so I simply used a retractable utility knife and carefully cut off about 1 inch of the outer black plastic insulation. I then unbraided some of the copper shielding and twisted that off to the side, and then cut about half of the center conductor's insulation off. Now I'll need to slide it through this guard spring here that helps provide some extra support to the cable as you flex it around so it doesn't break. And then that center conductor needs to go out through this hole and then get soldered on to form as best as you can a kind of a something like that. That's what will actually make contact with the connector when you screw it on. And I will then need to somewhat thread some of this copper through the spring here and solder it into there, so this whole thing effectively gets grounded, which will also form contact to this via the set screw. So the set screw digs into the spring, which is soldered to the shield on this, which will ground and shield the whole cable. And there we go. One end is done. After soldering that center lead on, I took a file and cleaned up that solder ball there. And then I used my meter on the continuity mode to make sure that there were no shorts and that both the center and the ground are conducting all the way to the other end of the cable. So now it's time to strip the insulation off of that and then rig up something with some alligator clips and these two resistors. And here's the other end pretty much done. I soldered one end of each resistor together and then one end to the shield, one end to the center conductor. I couldn't find a spare black alligator clip, just two red ones, so I just drew a black stripe on one of them and hooked up my multimeter, and I'm reading pretty darn close to 90 ohms, so that's good. I'm going to try using this now, and if it checks out good, I'm going to dig up a tube of sorts and kind of encapsulate this with hot glue or something to protect it and seal it off. And that'll do that. So, hey, if you need some kind of oddball cable, just so you know, you can make your own instead of spending a lot of money for a replacement one. Alright, now I'm going to fire up the 615 and give this another alignment. Alrighty, now to see this probe in action, I've got my 615 set for a sweep width appropriate for FM, because I want to check the audio reception on this. I've got my probe feeding a signal into the first IF stage for the audio, and I've got my demodulation probe set on the ratio detector output, which gives me this little trace on my scope here, which looks pretty much like it's supposed to on here, only it's sort of flipped left to right. Some sweep generators have the lower frequency on the left and higher on the right, which is what mine does, but if you look on this, they have the lower frequency on the right and higher on the left. I think it just depends on the type of sweep generator you're using. Alright, so here we go. A nice picture, and plenty of sound.
Just fine until you showed up.
Much, much better than it used to be.
Crusaders! B-A-T-M-A-N.
So now, I can put this back together and do the same treatment on another Admiral set, and finally call these two Admiral sets done, I hope. I decided to do one more test, and this is something I don't think I've touched on before. But for some of you, there's another simple way you can feed a signal into a TV, and that's with old basic analog cable. I know a lot of areas have switched to digital cable, in which case you need some kind of converter box. But here in Chicago, I just have basic analog cable, channels 2 through 88, I think. Well, those are the same old NTSC standards, so all you have to do is take your cable and get an adapter for 75 to 300 ohms and plug it right into the antenna terminals, and you'll get channels 2 through 13. So here's channel 2, for example. Great picture, great sound. And this is kind of neat because you can actually turn the channel clunker and watch more than one station. Now, the downside of doing this is if you got a couple dozen TVs like I do, well, it's kind of impractical to hook them all up to the cable. You could get a distribution box or splitter and run a separate cable to each TV back and right back to the single source. But what I'm going to be doing, as I've mentioned before, is I'll run all my signal sources into blonder tongue modulators like this, and actually use a broadcast antenna with enough power to cover my place. But at any rate, I hope you found this interesting, and pretty soon I should have this Admiral and another one wrapped up and can move on to other projects.